Fans thought they'd seen every twist this reality saga could possibly throw at them, but nobody was prepared for this. When Jasmine went live late last night, glowing, emotional, and visibly holding back tears, the internet instantly knew something was different. Comments flooded in at lightning speed. She looks nervous. Why is Kirk trending? Is this about the baby? And then came the moment that sent shockwaves through the fandom. Jasmine smiled, placed her hand on her belly, and said the words fans had been obsessing over for months. Yes, she's pregnant again. And yes, fans were right all along. For weeks, rumors had swirled that Jasmine's second baby wasn't just another chapter in her turbulent story, but the missing puzzle piece in a much bigger mystery. Screenshots, old interviews, deleted posts, nothing escaped the watchful eyes of fans who were convinced that Kirk, the man Jasmine once swore she was done with forever, was still very much part of her life. And now, with one emotional reveal, everything fans suspected suddenly felt terrifyingly real. But here's where the drama really ignites. Because this reveal didn't just confirm a pregnancy, it confirmed a father. And not just any father. The same Kirk who denied everything. The same Kirk who walked away. The same Kirk whose name Jasmine refused to say out loud, until now. As the news spread, emotions ran high. Fans were shocked. Friends went silent. Family members scrambled to control the narrative. And behind closed doors, a storm was already brewing, one filled with betrayal, accusations, and secrets that were never meant to see the light of day. Because if Kirk really is the father, then someone has been lying. And the truth is about to tear everyone apart. The moment Jasmine ended the live, the internet exploded, but behind the screens, inside her quiet living room, everything felt dangerously still. Her phone kept vibrating on the coffee table, messages piling up from producers, friends, and family, but she didn't reach for it. She already knew what they were going to say. She had finally said it out loud. What fans had guessed, argued about, and practically begged her to confirm was now real, and there was no pulling it back. Her second baby wasn't just another pregnancy announcement. It was a confession. Jasmine sank into the couch, one hand resting on her stomach, the other shaking slightly as she exhaled. I told you this would happen, her sister Maya muttered from across the room, arms crossed tightly. The second you hinted at Kirk, everything was going to blow up. Jasmine didn't respond right away. Her eyes were fixed on the dark screen of her phone, knowing exactly whose name would appear first. And right on cue, it buzzed again. Kirk. She let it ring. Across town, Kirk paced his apartment like a caged animal. His phone was still in his hand from when the live ended, his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. She actually said it, he snapped to his friend Devin, who sat silently at the kitchen counter. After everything we agreed on, she just went and said it. Devin raised an eyebrow. You mean after everything you denied? Kirk shot him a look. That's not the point. We said no names. We said protect the kid. He dragged a hand down his face, anger mixing with something far more dangerous, panic. Because Kirk knew something Jasmine hadn't said yet. Something that could turn this whole situation from messy to catastrophic. Back at Jasmine's place, Maya finally broke the silence. So what's the plan now? Because you know his family is already calling mine. Jasmine swallowed. There is no plan. I'm done hiding. Her voice cracked on the last word. I spent months letting people call me a liar, letting them say I was trapping him, letting them say this baby could be anyone's. I couldn't do it anymore. Maya softened slightly. You could have waited. Jasmine shook her head. If I waited, I would have talked myself out of it again. Online, fans were dissecting every second of the live. Timelines were being rebuilt. Old photos resurfaced showing Jasmine and Kirk at the same resort he swore he never went to. One fan commented, she said 7 months. That lines up exactly with his birthday trip. Another replied, he lied straight to our faces. Emotions ran high, and the family was left divided, not just emotionally but publicly. Kirk's mother, Linda, watched the clip 3 times in a row, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, it was calm, too calm. She wants attention, she said to Kirk's sister on the phone. If there was any truth to this, she would have come to us first. But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Because she remembered the night Kirk came home unusually quiet, the night he avoided every question about Jasmine. Meanwhile, Jasmine's mother was already crying, torn between fear and relief. Why now? She asked softly over speakerphone. Jasmine closed her eyes. Because this baby deserves the truth, even if it ruins me. The words hung heavy in the air. Kirk finally called again, and this time Jasmine answered. Neither of them spoke at first. The silence was loud, thick with everything they never resolved. You didn't have to say my name, Kirk said finally, his voice low and controlled. Jasmine laughed bitterly. I didn't say it, but I didn't have to. Everyone already knew. He scoffed. You knew what this would do. She shot back, yeah, and you knew what lying would do, but you still did it. On the other end of the line, Kirk's confidence cracked. You promised me, he said. You promised you wouldn't turn this into a circus. Jasmine's voice dropped. I promised I wouldn't lie anymore. That was when Kirk realized he was losing control of the story. As the call ended, producers were already circling, sensing ratings gold. Insiders whispered that footage existed, messages that had been deleted, and a meeting between Jasmine and Kirk that happened long after their supposed final breakup. Fans were shocked when an anonymous source claimed Kirk had been at Jasmine's place the very night he posted a photo meant to prove he was alone. Jasmine stood by the window later that night, watching the city lights blur through her tears. She knew this was only the beginning. Kirk wasn't going to stay quiet, and his family wouldn't either. Too many egos, too many secrets, too much pride. Somewhere out there, Kirk was already preparing his next move, and Jasmine could feel it in her bones. The truth was out, but the fight over it was just getting started, and as Kirk stared at his phone, typing and deleting the same message over and over, one thing was clear to both of them. Once part 2 of this story began, there would be no going back. By morning, the story had grown teeth. Blogs were posting, exclusive timelines, fan accounts were arguing in all caps, and Jasmine woke up to headlines she never approved. Her phone showed missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize, and one voicemail from a blocked caller that simply said, "You just made this worse." She deleted it without listening twice. She already knew who it was from. Kirk hadn't slept. He sat on the edge of his bed, scrolling through comments that painted him as everything from a coward to a monster. His name was trending for all the wrong reasons, and every denial he'd ever made was being replayed like evidence in a trial. Devin finally broke the silence. "You can't keep pretending this will go away." Kirk snapped, "I never said it would." Devin leaned forward. "Then what's the move?" Kirk stared at the wall. "The truth, but not all of it." That afternoon, Jasmine agreed to meet with producers, not to film, but to talk. She knew what that meant. They wanted leverage. They wanted tears. They wanted Kirk. "We can't protect you if you don't give us something," one of them said gently. Jasmine folded her hands over her stomach. "I'm not protecting myself anymore. I'm protecting my baby." The producer exchanged a look with his partner. "Then you should know Kirk is planning to speak." The words hit like a slap. Jasmine felt her chest tighten. "About what?" The producer hesitated. "His version." Jasmine let out a humorless laugh. "Of course he is." Kirk's version dropped that night in the form of a carefully worded post. No names, no confirmations, just enough to muddy the water. He wrote about misunderstandings, about private moments taken out of context, about not being certain until proper steps are taken. Fans were furious. "Say it or don't," one comment read. "This is manipulation," another said. Emotions ran high, and the family was left divided even further. Jasmine read the post 3 times before throwing her phone onto the couch. "He's still doing it," she whispered to Maya. "Still hiding." Maya shook her head. "No, he's preparing," and she was right. Kirk's mother, Linda, went on damage control mode, calling relatives, planting doubt, reminding everyone of Jasmine's past mistakes. "She's emotional," Linda said on one call. "You know how she is." But Kirk's sister wasn't convinced. "Mom, timelines don't lie." Linda snapped, "Neither do DNA tests." The words hung there, heavy and deliberate. That night, Kirk showed up unannounced at Jasmine's door. Maya tried to stop him, but Jasmine waved her off. When Kirk stepped inside, the air changed instantly. No cameras, no fans, just the two of them and everything they never said. "You blindsided me," Kirk started. Jasmine crossed her arms. "You abandoned me." He scoffed. "I asked for time." She shot back, "You asked for silence." They argued in circles, voices rising, accusations flying. "You're enjoying this," Kirk said at one point, bitterness dripping from his tone. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. "You think I enjoy being called a liar while pregnant?" She gestured to her stomach. "This isn't a storyline. This is my life." Kirk looked away, jaw tight. "Then why now?" She stepped closer. "Because you told me you'd step up. And then you disappeared." The argument ended with no resolution, just exhaustion. Kirk left with one final warning. "Don't force my hand." Jasmine watched the door close, her heart pounding. She knew exactly what that meant. Days later, a leaked message hit the internet. Screenshots allegedly showing Kirk asking Jasmine to wait until things calmed down before telling anyone the truth. Fans were shocked. Kirk's camp called them fake, but the damage was done. Producers reached out again, this time with urgency. "We have confirmation," they said. "There's footage from the night everyone says didn't happen." Jasmine felt sick. "I didn't leak anything." The producer nodded. "We know, but someone wants this out." Across town, Kirk watched the same leak go viral, his phone lighting up with calls he refused to answer. Devin stared at him. "Did you know about this?" Kirk didn't respond. "Kirk," Devin pressed. Kirk finally spoke, voice low. "I told one person. That person was his sister." The confrontation that followed tore their family apart. "I was protecting you," she yelled over the phone. Kirk shouted back, "By exposing me?" She fired back, "By forcing you to stop lying." The call ended with Kirk smashing his phone against the wall, the screen shattering like the image he'd built. Jasmine, meanwhile, sat with her mother, watching fan reactions pour in. Some supported her fiercely, others accused her of setting Kirk up. "Why is it always the woman who has to prove everything?" her mother asked quietly. Jasmine didn't answer. She was too busy wondering how far Kirk would go. And then came the rumor that changed everything. A blogger claimed Kirk had consulted a lawyer, not about custody, but about discrediting Jasmine publicly. The word character appeared in bold. Fans were divided instantly. Some said it was smart. Others called it cruel. Emotions ran high again, and the family was left divided in ways that felt permanent. Jasmine confronted Kirk one last time on the phone. "Tell me this isn't true," she begged. There was a long pause. "I'm doing what I have to do," he said finally. Her voice broke. "Even if it destroys me," Kirk whispered, "even if it saves me." As the call ended, Jasmine realized the story was no longer about a baby reveal. It was about control, reputation, and survival. Kirk had chosen his side, and she had chosen hers. Somewhere between lawyers, leaks, and lies, the truth was still there, waiting. And as Jasmine placed both hands on her stomach and took a deep breath, she knew the next chapter would force everything into the open, whether either of them was ready or not. The tension didn't just stay online anymore, it spilled into real life in ways no one could control. Jasmine barely left the house, not because she was hiding, but because every step outside felt like walking into a courtroom. Neighbors whispered, phones pointed in her direction, and even casual errands turned into emotional landmines. Inside, the silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the TV replaying clips of her own face, frozen mid-confession. Fans were shocked all over again every time the footage resurfaced, and each replay felt like reopening a wound. Kirk, on the other hand, went quiet. Too quiet. No posts, no statements, no denials. That silence scared people more than his words ever had. Insiders claimed he was strategizing, but Jasmine knew better. Kirk had always disappeared when things got real. It was his pattern. And patterns don't lie. The first official crack came when Jasmine's ex-friend Lena decided to speak. She went live unexpectedly, claiming she had kept secrets for too long. Her voice shook as she talked about nights Jasmine cried, about Kirk promising he'd stand by her, about conversations that directly contradicted his public statements. He knew, Lena said firmly. From the beginning, he knew. Fans were stunned. Some praised Lena for her honesty, others accused her of clout chasing. Emotions ran high, and the family was left divided yet again. Kirk watched the live with his fists clenched. Devin muttered, "This is getting out of hand." Kirk snapped back, "No, this is getting out of my control." Within hours, his legal team issued a warning, subtly threatening defamation suits without naming anyone directly. The move backfired. Fans read it as intimidation. Hashtags flipped overnight. Jasmine received a message from Kirk's sister later that night. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she wrote. Jasmine stared at the screen for a long time before replying. It was already far when he chose silence over truth. There was no response. Then came the meeting that changed everything. Producers arranged a mediated sit-down, off-camera, promising privacy. Jasmine hesitated, but her mother urged her to go. "You can't keep carrying this alone," she said. Kirk arrived late, sunglasses on, guarded. When they sat across from each other, the tension was unbearable. "This isn't about us anymore," Jasmine said quietly. "It's about the baby." Kirk leaned back. "Then do things the right way." She met his eyes. "I am." The mediator brought up the DNA test. Kirk nodded stiffly. "I'll do it." Jasmine felt a strange mix of relief and anger. "You should have offered months ago." Kirk didn't answer. He just looked tired. For a moment, the anger dropped, replaced by something closer to regret. "I didn't think it would end like this," he admitted. Jasmine's voice was steady. "It didn't have to." Word of the test leaked within days. Fans exploded. Some celebrated, others said it was too late. Kirk's mother released a statement saying the family welcomed clarity, but sources said she was furious behind closed doors. "This makes us look guilty," she reportedly yelled. Kirk's sister stopped taking family calls altogether. As the waiting period began, both sides unraveled. Jasmine struggled emotionally, hormones amplifying every feeling. One night she broke down sobbing, telling Maya, "What if he still denies it?" Maya hugged her tightly. "Then the truth will say it for you." Kirk, meanwhile, spiraled in private. He confessed to Devin, "I was scared. I didn't want my whole life to change." Devin replied quietly, "It already did." The results came back on a rainy afternoon. Jasmine got the call first. She sat frozen, listening, heart pounding. When she hung up, she didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just closed her eyes. Confirmed. Undeniable. No more speculation. Kirk got his call an hour later. He sat alone in his car, staring at the dashboard. Confirmed. He slammed his fist against the steering wheel, a mix of fear and relief washing over him. There was no running now. The announcement hit the internet within hours, though neither of them officially released it. An anonymous source confirmed what fans had known all along. Fans were shocked, vindicated, emotional. Comments poured in. She told the truth. He lied. That baby deserves better. Jasmine posted a single sentence that night. The truth doesn't need defending. Kirk didn't post anything. Instead, he showed up at Jasmine's door again, eyes red, voice unsteady. "I'm sorry," he said. It was the first time he'd said it without conditions. Jasmine looked at him for a long moment. "Sorry doesn't erase months of silence." He nodded. "I know, but I'm here now." Whether that was enough remained unclear. Forgiveness wasn't instant. Trust wasn't automatic. The family was still divided, fans still arguing, wounds still open. But one thing had changed forever. The truth was no longer up for debate. As Kirk left that night, Jasmine stood in the doorway, one hand on her stomach, feeling the weight of everything she'd endured. The story that started with whispers and denial had turned into proof and accountability. And while the future was still uncertain, one thing was finally clear to everyone watching: fans were right, and the fallout was only just beginning. Even with the confirmation out in the open, peace didn't follow. Instead, the truth acted like gasoline on a fire that had been quietly burning for months. Jasmine thought once the DNA results were known, the noise would die down, but it only shifted. Fans weren't asking if Kirk was the father anymore. Now they wanted to know what kind of father he would be, and whether Jasmine would ever forgive him. Kirk tried to re-enter the narrative carefully, almost cautiously. He started by reaching out privately to Jasmine more consistently, checking in, asking about appointments, offering to help. At first, she barely responded. Not out of spite, but exhaustion. Every message reminded her of the months she spent alone, defending herself while he watched from the shadows. Maya noticed the toll immediately. "You don't owe him instant access," she reminded her. Jasmine nodded, but part of her still hoped he would finally show up the way he promised. Meanwhile, Kirk's family fractured in ways that felt permanent. Linda refused to speak to the press, but sources close to her claimed she blamed Jasmine entirely. "If she hadn't gone public, none of this would have happened," she reportedly said. Kirk's sister pushed back hard, telling anyone who would listen that the situation exploded because of lies, not truth. Holiday plans were cancelled. Group chats went silent. Emotions ran high, and the family was left divided beyond repair. Jasmine's family wasn't immune either. Distant relatives questioned her decisions. Old friends resurfaced with unsolicited advice. Even her mother struggled, torn between pride and fear. "I just want you safe," she said one night, watching Jasmine rub her stomach absently. Jasmine replied quietly, "I want my child to grow up knowing I didn't lie." As the weeks passed, producers circled again, sensing the next act. They offered Jasmine a sit-down interview, promising her side, uninterrupted. She hesitated. The last time she spoke, everything exploded. But fans were demanding it, and silence was starting to feel like surrender. After days of deliberation, she agreed. The interview aired on a quiet Sunday night, and by morning, nothing was quiet anymore. Jasmine spoke calmly, but every word carried weight. She talked about loneliness, about promises broken in private, about the moment she realized protecting Kirk meant sacrificing herself. "I wasn't trying to trap anyone," she said, voice steady. "I was trying to survive." Fans were shocked by her composure. Many admitted they'd misjudged her. Others doubled down on their criticism, accusing her of rewriting history. Emotions ran high once again. Kirk watched the interview alone. Halfway through, he muted the TV, overwhelmed. Devon broke the silence. "She's not attacking you." Kirk laughed bitterly. "She doesn't have to. The truth already did." For the first time, he admitted out loud what he'd been avoiding. "I was scared of losing control. And I lost everything instead." Public pressure mounted for Kirk to respond properly, not with vague statements but with accountability. Days passed. Then he finally posted a video. No filters, no background music. Just him. He admitted he handled things wrong. He admitted fear drove his silence. But when he said, "I never meant to hurt Jasmine," the comment section erupted. Fans replayed his past denials side by side with the clip. Apologies, they argued, don't erase patterns. Jasmine didn't comment on his video. Privately, though, she watched it twice. The apology felt real, but late. She told Maya, "I believe he's sorry. I just don't know if that's enough." Maya squeezed her hand. "You don't have to decide everything right now." Behind the scenes, custody discussions began quietly. Not in court, but in conversations filled with tension and guarded optimism. Kirk expressed wanting to be involved. Jasmine set boundaries immediately. "This isn't about optics," she told him during one call. "It's about consistency." Kirk agreed, though whether he understood fully remained uncertain. Fans dissected every move. If Kirk liked a post, it trended. If Jasmine went quiet, speculation exploded. Some fans rooted for reconciliation. Others warned her not to trust him. "Don't let him rewrite the ending," one viral comment read. Jasmine saw it and saved it. Then came another twist. A former associate of Kirk's hinted at a secret agreement he tried to push early on, one that would have kept his name out of everything in exchange for financial support. Jasmine was furious when she heard. He wanted to buy silence, she said, shaking. Kirk denied it publicly, but privately admitted he'd considered options. The revelation reopened wounds that hadn't even begun to heal. The backlash was swift. Sponsors distanced themselves from Kirk. Jasmine, unexpectedly, gained support she never anticipated. Brands reached out. Women shared their stories. She became a symbol for speaking up, even when it's messy. The irony wasn't lost on her. I didn't want to be strong, she told her mother. I just didn't want to lie. As the due date slowly approached, the chaos softened but never fully disappeared. Kirk attended one appointment, standing awkwardly beside Jasmine, unsure of his place. The doctor spoke, the baby's heartbeat filled the room, and for a brief moment, everything else faded. Kirk's eyes filled with tears. Jasmine noticed but didn't comment. Outside that room, nothing was simple. Trust was fragile, forgiveness uncertain, families still divided, fans still watching, but something fundamental had shifted. Jasmine was no longer defending herself. Kirk was no longer hiding. The story that once centered on rumors had become about responsibility. Late one night, Jasmine sat alone, writing a letter to her unborn child. She didn't know what the future would look like, or where Kirk would fit into it. But she knew this much: the truth, once revealed, changed everything. And no matter how loud the world got, she would make sure her child grew up knowing that when it mattered most, she chose honesty over fear, even when it cost her everything. As the final weeks of pregnancy crept closer, the pressure intensified in ways Jasmine never expected. The public had moved on from questioning the truth to demanding outcomes. Would they co-parent? Would Kirk step up publicly? Would Jasmine forgive him, or would this end in a permanent fracture? Every silence was interpreted, every move was magnified. Fans were shocked by how invested they had become, as if this wasn't a real child but a finale they felt entitled to. Jasmine tried to reclaim some sense of normalcy. She focused on nesting, setting up the nursery, folding tiny clothes late at night while the world argued outside her door. But even in those quiet moments, the noise found her. Notifications buzzing, messages from strangers telling her what she should do with her life, her child, her future. Some were supportive, others cruel. Emotions ran high, and even her strongest days felt fragile. Kirk struggled in a different way. Now that denial was no longer an option, he faced the consequences of delay. His reputation had taken a hit, friendships cooled, opportunities quietly disappeared. The silence that once protected him now isolated him. He admitted to Devon one night, "I thought waiting would make it easier. It just made everything worse." Devon replied, "You weren't waiting. You were hiding." Kirk didn't argue. He couldn't. He tried to show consistency. He showed up when Jasmine allowed it. He asked instead of assumed. But every attempt came with the weight of the past. Jasmine kept her boundaries firm, not out of punishment, but self-preservation. "This isn't a reset," she told him calmly during one conversation. "This is starting from zero." Kirk nodded, swallowing hard. Starting from zero felt harder than starting from nothing. Family dynamics continued to unravel. Kirk's mother refused to attend any events connected to the baby, insisting privately that acknowledgement felt like surrender. Kirk's sister, however, sent Jasmine a gift with a handwritten note that simply read, "The baby deserves better than our pride." Jasmine cried when she read it. It was the first olive branch she'd received from that side. Jasmine's own family remained protective but strained. Her mother worried constantly about stress affecting the baby. "You don't have to be strong all the time," she reminded her. Jasmine replied softly, "I don't know how not to be right now." The weight of being watched, judged, and analyzed had become second nature. Then came the unexpected moment that shifted everything again. During a routine appointment, doctors flagged a potential complication. Nothing definitive, but enough to raise concern. Jasmine's world narrowed instantly. The drama, the fans, the headlines all faded into the background. This was real fear. When she told Kirk, his reaction was immediate. He dropped everything and met her at the hospital without asking if he should. In that moment, there was no strategy, no image control. Just panic and concern. They sat side by side in silence, listening to medical explanations, holding on to uncertainty. Kirk reached for her hand without thinking. Jasmine hesitated, then let him. It wasn't forgiveness. It was necessity. Fans would later speculate when they saw him leaving the hospital with her, emotions running wild once again, but inside that room, none of that mattered. The complication resolved days later, but the scare left a mark. It stripped away layers of resentment, if only temporarily, and reminded both of them what was actually at stake. Jasmine told Maya afterward, "For a second, none of this mattered. Not the lies, not the internet. Just the baby." Maya nodded. "Maybe that's where the real story is." Fans noticed the shift. Kirk became quieter, less reactive. Jasmine became more guarded but calmer. Speculation continued, but the tone softened. Instead of outrage, there was curiosity. Instead of accusations, questions. The family was still divided, but cracks began to show where healing might one day happen. Weeks later, Jasmine went into labor earlier than expected. The news broke fast, as it always did. Fans were shocked by how emotional they felt watching updates from people they'd never met. Kirk arrived at the hospital before anyone else. When Jasmine saw him, she didn't argue. She just nodded. There wasn't room for conflict anymore. Labor was long, exhausting, raw. There were no cameras, no posts, no commentary. Just pain, fear, and determination. Kirk stayed by her side, silent, supportive, present in a way he hadn't been before. When the baby finally cried, the sound cut through everything. Jasmine wept openly. Kirk collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed. In that moment, titles didn't matter. Villain, victim, liar, hero. None of it applied. There was just a child who existed because of them, whether they were ready or not. The announcement came hours later. Simple, respectful, no drama. Fans reacted with unexpected tenderness. Congratulatory messages flooded in. Even critics softened. Something about new life shifted the energy. Emotions ran high, but this time in a quieter way. Kirk held the baby carefully, almost reverently. Jasmine watched him, unsure what she felt. Hope? Fear? Both. She knew this didn't erase the past. Trust would take time, if it came at all. Co-parenting would be complicated. Families would still clash. Fans would still speculate. But the story had changed again. This was no longer just about exposure or confirmation. It was about accountability after the truth. About what people do once the spotlight fades and reality sets in. Jasmine leaned back against her pillow, exhausted but clear-minded. She hadn't controlled how the story unfolded, but she had controlled one thing. She told the truth when it mattered most. And as Kirk looked down at the child he once tried to avoid acknowledging, he understood something that had taken him far too long to learn. The truth doesn't just confirm rumors. It demands change. And whether he was ready or not, his life, like Jasmine's, had been permanently rewritten from the moment fans realized they were right all along. The days after the birth felt unreal, like the world had slowed down just enough for Jasmine to breathe again. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft sounds of the baby, and for the first time in months, there were no arguments, no accusations, no phones buzzing nonstop. Jasmine watched her child sleep, tiny chest rising and falling, and felt something settle inside her. The chaos hadn't disappeared, but it no longer owned her. Kirk stayed nearby, careful not to overstep. He brought food, checked in with nurses, held the baby when invited and stepped back when not. There was an awkwardness between them, but also a new understanding. Jasmine noticed it in the way he listened now, really listened, instead of preparing a defense. One evening, as the sky outside the window faded into dusk, he spoke quietly. "I know I can't fix what I broke." Jasmine didn't look at him. "No," she said softly. "You can't." After a pause, she added, "But you can decide what you do next." Kirk nodded. It was the first answer that felt honest. When they finally went home, reality returned fast. The internet reignited with speculation, analyzing every photo angle, every absence, every silence. Fans were shocked when Jasmine didn't immediately post a polished announcement. Instead, days passed. Some people accused her of hiding again. Others defended her fiercely. Emotions ran high, but Jasmine stayed offline, focused on learning her baby's rhythms, on surviving sleepless nights and quiet moments of overwhelm. Kirk faced his own reckoning. He released a final statement, not defensive, not vague. He acknowledged paternity fully, admitted to fear, avoidance, and mistakes without qualifiers. Reactions were mixed. Some accepted it, others called it too late. But something shifted. The conversation moved from rumor to responsibility. That alone changed the tone. Families attempted cautious reconnections. Kirk's sister visited first, respectful, tentative. She held the baby with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry it took all this for me to speak up," she whispered. Jasmine nodded. "I'm glad you're here now." Kirk's mother remained distant, sending gifts through intermediaries but refusing direct contact. It hurt, but Jasmine expected it. Not everyone chooses growth at the same pace. As weeks passed, co-parenting discussions became more practical. Schedules, boundaries, expectations. They were not romantic, not dramatic, just necessary. Kirk struggled with the limits at first, but he complied. Jasmine noticed. Consistency mattered more than words now. Every kept promise rebuilt a fraction of trust. Every missed one threatened to undo it. Fans continued to watch, to speculate, to debate endings. Some wanted reconciliation. Others wanted distance. Jasmine learned to tune it out. She posted once, a simple message about protecting peace and prioritizing her child. The response was overwhelming. Women shared stories. Parents offered support. The narrative shifted again, this time away from scandal and toward survival. Late one night, Jasmine sat alone, rocking her baby, thinking about how quickly truth changes people. How revealing it doesn't guarantee justice, but it does remove the mask. Kirk was no longer hiding. She was no longer defending. The family was still divided, but lines were clearer now. Kirk, at home, stared at a photo he hadn't shared publicly. Him holding the baby, eyes wide, expression raw. He didn't post it. Not everything needed an audience. He finally understood that. Months earlier, fans had been obsessed with being right. Now, many were watching quietly, recognizing that being right came with consequences no one could fully predict. The story they followed wasn't entertainment anymore. It was real, ongoing, unresolved. And Jasmine knew something important as she placed her child gently into the crib. Truth doesn't end the story. It begins a harder one. But it's the only one worth living. Time moved forward in a strange, uneven way after that. Days blurred together, marked not by headlines or trending topics, but by feedings, quiet cries, and moments where Jasmine caught herself staring at her child just to make sure this was real. The drama hadn't vanished, but it no longer dictated her every breath. She had crossed into a new phase, one where survival looked quieter, steadier, and far less performative. Kirk adjusted slowly, awkwardly, as if learning a language he should have known all along. He arrived when he said he would. He listened when Jasmine spoke, even when what she said wasn't easy to hear. There were still tense moments, conversations that ended too quickly, silences that felt heavy, but there was progress. Not the kind fans crave, not dramatic or cinematic, but real. Friends who once chose sides began to drift back, cautiously. Some apologized, some didn't, acting as if nothing had happened. Jasmine learned to accept what felt genuine and let the rest go. Motherhood changed her tolerance for nonsense overnight. She no longer had the energy to explain herself to people committed to misunderstanding her. Online, the story evolved again. Newer viewers discovered the saga late, reacting with fresh shock. Older fans argued with them, correcting timelines, defending or condemning choices. Emotions ran high, but Jasmine rarely looked anymore. She had muted the noise, not out of bitterness, but necessity. Peace required distance. One afternoon, Kirk admitted something he had never said out loud. I was afraid if I acknowledged it, I'd lose control of everything. Jasmine looked at him, tired but honest. You lost control the moment you chose fear over truth. He nodded slowly. There was no argument left in him. Only understanding, late but sincere. The family divide remained complicated. Kirk's mother continued to stay away, her absence loud even in silence. Jasmine made peace with it privately. My child doesn't need everyone, she told her mother one night. Just people who choose love over pride. Her mother smiled sadly. That's wisdom most people never reach. Co-parenting became more structured, less emotional. Calendars replaced conversations. Boundaries replaced hope. And strangely, that helped. Without blurred expectations, they found a rhythm. Not a happy ending, not a tragedy, just a functional reality built on honesty instead of illusion. Fans noticed the lack of chaos and grew restless. Some accused them both of hiding. Others praised the restraint. Jasmine understood something then that she hadn't before. The audience doesn't always want healing. They want spectacle. Choosing peace meant disappointing people who thrived on drama. She was finally okay with that. Kirk faced lasting consequences. Some doors never reopened. Some opportunities quietly disappeared. But others emerged, ones rooted in accountability rather than image. He didn't talk about redemption publicly. He focused on consistency privately. It was harder, but it felt real. Late one night, Jasmine wrote again in her journal, reflecting on everything that had unfolded. She didn't regret telling the truth. Even now, especially now, the truth had cost her comfort, reputation, and ease, but it had given her clarity. It had forced growth where denial once lived. She looked at her sleeping child and felt a calm she hadn't known before. This story had started with whispers, rumors, and doubt. It had escalated into conflict, division, and exposure. But it didn't end there. It settled into responsibility, into choices made daily without applause. Fans may always debate who was right, who was wrong, who should have done more or less. But for Jasmine, the answer no longer mattered. She had chosen honesty when it was hardest. And that choice had changed the trajectory of everything. As the house fell quiet, Jasmine realized the most powerful part of the story was never the reveal. It was what came after, when no one was watching as closely, when applause faded, and real life demanded courage without an audience. That was where truth truly lived. As the months passed, the story that once felt explosive slowly transformed into something quieter but heavier. Jasmine no longer woke up dreading her phone, but that didn't mean the weight was gone. It had simply shifted. Now it lived in late-night thoughts, in questions about the future, in the responsibility of shaping a life that began in the middle of chaos. She wondered often how much of this her child would one day learn, and whether the truth, when explained gently, would feel different than it had in real time. Kirk continued showing up, not perfectly, but more honestly than before. There were days he was present and helpful, and days where old habits threatened to resurface. Jasmine noticed immediately when he slipped into defensiveness or tried to control the narrative again, even in small ways. She didn't argue anymore. She simply called it out. "We're not doing that," she would say calmly. Each time, Kirk would pause, swallow his pride, and adjust. It wasn't easy, but it was progress. Friends and extended family still whispered. Some thought Jasmine was too forgiving. Others thought she was too cold. She learned that no version of her choices would satisfy everyone. Motherhood hardened and softened her at the same time. She became less reactive, more deliberate. She trusted her instincts in a way she never had before. The internet, predictably, found new angles. Conspiracy theories resurfaced, old clips were reposted out of context, and some fans refused to let the story evolve. They wanted villains and victims, not nuance. Emotions ran high again briefly when a gossip account claimed Kirk and Jasmine were secretly reconciling. Both of them ignored it. Silence, Jasmine learned, was sometimes the loudest boundary. Kirk faced a moment of reckoning when a former associate publicly blamed him for lying until he couldn't anymore. Instead of responding with anger, Kirk did something unexpected. He didn't deny it, he admitted it. "I was wrong," he said simply in a brief comment. Fans were shocked by the lack of defensiveness. It didn't erase the past, but it signaled growth. Not everyone accepted it, but Jasmine noticed the difference. Accountability without explanation felt stronger than excuses ever had. The family divide remained, but lines softened slightly over time. Kirk's mother eventually asked for photos, then updates, then short calls. She never apologized outright, but she stopped pretending nothing had happened. Jasmine accepted that as her version of progress. Not every apology comes in words. As the baby grew, laughter replaced some of the heaviness. Milestones brought perspective. The world didn't stop because of their drama, and neither did life. Jasmine began to feel like herself again, not the version shaped by headlines, but the one grounded in purpose. She found joy in routines, in quiet mornings, in moments that belonged only to her and her child. Kirk, too, changed in ways that weren't loud. He stopped performing remorse and started practicing responsibility. He didn't post about fatherhood. He lived it. Jasmine noticed. Trust didn't return overnight, but it grew slowly, built on actions rather than promises. Fans eventually moved on to the next scandal, the next reveal, the next shock. Some stayed, quietly supportive. Others disappeared entirely. The noise faded, and with it, the pressure to explain or justify. Jasmine realized something profound in that silence. The truth didn't need constant defense once it was lived consistently. Late one evening, as Jasmine watched her child sleep, she reflected on how far everything had come. The story that once felt like it would destroy her had instead reshaped her. It had forced clarity, courage, and boundaries she never knew she needed. She didn't romanticize the pain, but she didn't regret the honesty either. Kirk once asked her, quietly, "Do you ever wish you hadn't said anything?" Jasmine thought for a long moment before answering. "No," she said finally. "I wish it hadn't been so hard. But I don't wish I stayed silent." Kirk nodded, accepting the truth of that. The family was still divided in places. Scars remained, but the chaos no longer defined them. What defined them now were choices made after the truth, when the spotlight dimmed and accountability became personal. And Jasmine understood, with calm certainty, that fans being right was never the point. The point was what happened when being right forced everyone to face who they really were. Life didn't suddenly become easy just because the loudest part of the storm had passed. It became quieter, yes, but quiet leaves room for reflection, and reflection brings its own weight. Jasmine found herself thinking often about identity, about how quickly the world had decided who she was based on fragments of a story they never fully lived. She had been labeled reckless, manipulative, brave, strong, weak, all within the same week. Now, removed from the noise, she had to decide who she believed herself to be. Motherhood grounded her in ways nothing else ever had. The baby didn't care about timelines or public opinion. The baby needed comfort, presence, patience. On the hardest nights, when exhaustion crept in and doubts resurfaced, Jasmine reminded herself that this was the only role that truly mattered. Everything else was background. Kirk continued learning what accountability actually looked like. It wasn't one apology or one public statement. It was showing up on days when no one was watching. It was accepting limits without resentment. There were moments he failed, moments when frustration slipped through, but Jasmine noticed something different now. When called out, he listened instead of deflecting. That alone marked a shift. There were still difficult conversations. Finances, schedules, long-term plans. They didn't argue the way they used to. Instead, discussions were slow, sometimes uncomfortable, but honest. Jasmine no longer raised her voice. She didn't need to. Calm had become her power. Friends who once thrived on drama slowly faded from her life. Others stepped up in unexpected ways. One friend admitted, "I didn't know how to support you without choosing sides." Jasmine replied gently, "Support doesn't require sides. It requires empathy." Not everyone could offer that. She accepted it without bitterness. Online, the narrative lost its urgency. New scandals replaced old ones. Jasmine's name trended less frequently. When it did, the tone had changed. Less accusation, more reflection. Fans who once argued now discussed lessons. Accountability, truth, consequences. Emotions ran high less often, and when they did, it felt distant, almost detached. Kirk faced moments of loneliness that forced introspection. Losing approval had been harder than he expected. Without constant validation, he had to confront parts of himself he'd long avoided. He admitted to Devon one night, "I thought being exposed would end me. It didn't. It just stripped away who I was pretending to be." Devon replied, "That's usually how it works." The family divide continued to evolve slowly. Kirk's mother began softening, not dramatically, but gradually. Short visits, polite conversations, boundaries respected. Jasmine didn't push. She let time do what pressure never could. As the baby grew, milestones became moments of shared humanity. First smiles, first laughs. Kirk and Jasmine found themselves standing side by side at times, not as partners, not as enemies, but as parents witnessing something bigger than both of them. Those moments didn't erase the past, but they reframed it. Jasmine started thinking about her future beyond survival. She considered work again, not driven by proving anything, but by reclaiming parts of herself that had been paused. She chose carefully, valuing flexibility and peace over ambition. The world had taught her the cost of chasing approval. She wasn't interested anymore. Fans occasionally reached out privately, sharing how her story gave them courage to speak their own truths. Jasmine read those messages slowly, thoughtfully. She never responded to all, but she carried them with her. The impact of honesty extended beyond her own life. That realization humbled her. Kirk, too, received messages, some harsh, some forgiving. He accepted both. He no longer needed to defend himself constantly. Accountability meant allowing people to feel what they felt without trying to control it. One evening, months after everything had settled, Jasmine sat alone reflecting on how the story would eventually be remembered. She knew people would simplify it. They always did. Heroes and villains, right and wrong, but life lived in the gray never fit clean narratives. She made peace with that. She had chosen truth when it was terrifying. She had endured judgment, division, and exposure. And in return, she gained clarity, resilience, and a life built on honesty rather than performance. That trade felt worth it. Kirk understood something similar in his own way. Fear had driven his silence. Truth forced his growth. The process was painful, but necessary. Avoidance would have cost him far more in the end. The family was still divided in places. Scars remained, not everything healed, but the chaos no longer defined their lives. Routine did, responsibility did, choice did. And Jasmine knew, deep down, that this was the real ending most people never see. Not a dramatic reveal or viral moment, but the quiet work of living differently after the truth comes out. That was where real change lived. The rhythm of life continued to settle into something almost unfamiliar to Jasmine: stability. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't painless, but it was real. Mornings began with soft light through the curtains, the baby stirring before the world outside fully woke up. Jasmine learned to treasure those moments because they belonged to her alone, untouched by opinions or expectations. The chaos that once defined her days now felt distant, like a storm she survived rather than one she was still trapped inside. Kirk adjusted to this new normal in his own uneven way. He stopped trying to prove anything and focused instead on being present. Sometimes that meant long stretches of silence, just sitting nearby, learning when to speak and when not to. Jasmine noticed how different that felt from before, when every interaction carried tension or defense. This version of him wasn't loud or convincing. It was quieter, steadier, and oddly more sincere. They still had difficult conversations. Trust didn't magically return, and forgiveness wasn't a switch that flipped overnight. Jasmine was honest about that. "I'm not angry all the time anymore," she told him once, "but that doesn't mean I've forgotten." Kirk nodded. "I don't expect you to." That acceptance mattered more than any apology. The family dynamics continued to evolve slowly, almost cautiously. Kirk's mother began asking more questions, not confrontational, just curious. It wasn't warmth, but it wasn't hostility either. Jasmine accepted the middle ground. She had learned that pushing people toward growth often pushed them away instead. Patience, though uncomfortable, created space. As weeks turned into months, the story that once consumed so many people became background noise. Occasionally, a clip resurfaced or a headline tried to revive old tension, but the reaction was muted. Fans had moved on, and so had Jasmine. The validation she once unconsciously sought no longer mattered. She trusted herself now in a way she never had before. Jasmine started rebuilding parts of her identity that had been overshadowed by survival. She explored creative outlets again, took on small projects that brought joy rather than stress. She chose carefully who had access to her life. Boundaries became non-negotiable, not out of bitterness, but clarity. Kirk faced his own quiet reckoning. Without constant attention, he confronted who he was without an audience. It wasn't always comfortable. There were moments of regret, moments where he wished he could rewrite the past. But instead of dwelling there, he focused on consistency. One day at a time. One promise kept. One responsibility honored. Co-parenting settled into something functional. Schedules were respected. Communication stayed direct. There were disagreements, but they didn't spiral. Jasmine felt a sense of control return, not over Kirk, but over her own life. That distinction mattered. Fans who remained invested shifted their focus from drama to outcomes. Some commented on how different everything felt now. Calmer, more grounded. Others quietly disengaged, uninterested once the spectacle faded. Jasmine understood that too. Drama attracts attention. Healing doesn't. One evening, Jasmine reflected on how the entire situation had reshaped her understanding of truth. Telling it didn't bring immediate relief. It brought chaos, judgment, and loss. But it also stripped away illusions she didn't realize she was living under. She no longer performed for acceptance. She lived for alignment. Kirk acknowledged something similar during a late conversation with Devon. I thought protecting my image would protect my life, he admitted. But it just delayed everything I needed to face. Devon replied, truth doesn't destroy you. Avoidance does. Kirk carried that with him. The baby grew stronger, louder, more curious. Laughter replaced many of the heavy silences that once filled the house. Jasmine found joy in watching that growth, in knowing that despite everything, something good had emerged. Not because of the pain, but in spite of it. Jasmine knew the story would never fully disappear. People would always have opinions. Rumors would resurface, but she no longer felt the need to respond. She had learned that peace often comes from disengaging, not defending. Looking back, the reveal that once felt like the end of everything was actually the beginning of something harder but more honest. Fans being right was never the victory they imagined. The real victory was living without lies, even when the cost was high. As Jasmine closed her eyes one night, listening to her child breathe softly, she felt a sense of calm that once seemed impossible. The truth had changed her life, not by making it easier, but by making it real. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. And now that you've heard how this explosive story unfolded, the question is no longer whether the fans were right. The question is what happens next. Because even though the truth is finally out, not every wound is healed, not every relationship is repaired, and not every consequence has finished unfolding. Jasmine's journey proves that revealing the truth can change everything, but it doesn't magically make life easier. It makes it real. And Kirk's role in all of this raises one final question fans can't stop asking. Has he truly changed, or is this just the calm before another storm? This story may have started with rumors and denials, but it's far from over. Co-parenting, family tension, trust issues, and public pressure are still very much part of the picture. And as emotions ran high and the family was left divided, one thing became clear. Once the truth is spoken, there's no going back. Every choice from here on out matters even more. Now it's your turn. Do you believe Jasmine did the right thing by speaking out when she did? Do you think Kirk deserves a second chance after everything that came out? Or do you feel some lines, once crossed, can never truly be erased? Let us know what you think, because this conversation is far from finished. If you want more dramatic deep dives, shocking reveals, and stories that keep you questioning everything you thought you knew, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. And don't forget to comment below with your thoughts, theories, and predictions, because your voice is part of this story too.